Rachel Vargas, and I am the registrar at the art museums. I deal with, the legalities of the museum. I make sure when we buy something or we're given something that we have the proper legal paperwork to transfer title of the object to us. I do packing and shipping. So if we are sending a painting out to an exhibition, we just sent a painting to Germany, I oversee all of that. And as we start to get ready to bring the exhibitions in, here when we are at the Kresge and at the Broad, I make the arrangements for that, and insurance, that sort of thing.
I'm writing a story about the balancing act, the financial balancing act for large institutions like universities, between certain programs and the arts and culture and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously the Broad Museum has been a big investment for the university. But then at the same time, there's been, small program cuts in other areas. Like I know the deaf education program has been cut.
Right.
And the music therapy program, small things like that. And I know people who have been influenced by that, so I'm going to interview those people as well.
Right.
I kind of just want to see different sides. So as someone who's very involved in the new museum, tell me how it's going to benefit the university.
Well, the most important thing to keep in mind is that an alumnus came forward and said, I'll give you $28 million for the museum. It's the largest gift the university's ever received, and I don't think there's any way they could say no. And so I think some of the problems are, usually it's, some things like the arts, they're a little bit sexier for people to give money to because they, you can have fancy parties at the new museum that people like to go to, and it's a way for people to socialize. And I will say, I think it's a harder sell to try to get somebody to give $1 million to save, some of those programs that have been cut. So that's part of the problem. The amount of money that the universities had to put in towards the project, they're putting in a lot of man hours for development, to go around and raise money for the museum, and they're giving us money to pay for staffing and pay for running the museum, like electricity and heating, that sort of thing. But everything else, the director and our development staff has to raise to run the museum. And I think that MSU, and again, I am a bit of a newcomer to MSU, but from what I can see, they have been trying to fight for a long time that they are an agricultural college, and to shake that off. And they still they have that turfgrass program, which is one of the most famous in the country, if not the world. And they do a lot of important research in that area. A lot of the sciences all run through that. But I think they're trying to have everything that that the normal big universities have. And most of them have a sizable art museum, and that was something that was lacking before. I don't know, again, I don't know that much, but I don't know how much they have really invested in the arts. I mean, the theater seems very old. Wharton, again, is new, but that was something where somebody stepped up and gave a lot of money. So, like I said, I think in some ways maybe the arts are a little bit easier to get people to fund than some of these academic programs. I think that they relied in the past upon writing for grants, money from the government, and I would think that's all going to dry up.
That the arts is definitely a more prominent thing for a community.
Mm-hmm.
The museum is going to be big, and it's going to be right on Grand River. So to see, I feel like, me coming into this, I didn't know there was a huge donor. I'd assumed that university was funding
it. Yes.
So the community may see that same thing and think, oh, they're spending so much money on the arts, but they're cutting programs. How do you think, what exactly, would you want to tell the community about that?
Well, I think they have tried very hard, not just because they want to give, Mr. and Mrs. Broad proper credit for the amount of money that we've gotten, but to make sure that people understand where the money came from. Because, again, ever since they've announced the museum, my favorite comment, and I think it was, it's Detroit Free Press, or one of the newspaper blog sites, when they announced the gift, is somebody said, "That's ridiculous. Eli Broad should give $500 to every citizen of Detroit." And again, that's the kind of answers that you get. We got a lot of answers of people saying, if you just built a brick building that matched all the other brick buildings on, the older part of campus, you would have saved a lot of money. Maybe, but the reality is in the art world today, and even in the city of Lansing, when you look at the East Lansing guidebook of what there is to do, it's like page 2 and it's Uncle John's, Apple Mill. Like Boston has an entire book where I moved from, on things to do in Boston. There's not a lot for a visitor to the area, for people to see. So I think it is one of those things where they think it's also going to help with tourism. And then another factor is that, we're a state university, partially now funded by the citizens of the state, but there's not much that they can do at the university. Those programs, again, you talked about cutting. The person from the outside, they can see in this esoteric way that they are funding people who are going to learn how to work with deaf people. But it's not like they, go to things or can access that or can sit in on classes. And so at a lot of universities, your museums and your libraries are, and even at a lot of museums, you can't go into the libraries. Your museums sometimes are the only things that the public can access. And, because we're a land-grant college, you can also access, that people will be able to go to the museum for free. So it is a way that the university can open its doors to the public. You can go to a football game, but you have to pay, a lot of money to get a good seat. With all of the sports, you have to do that. If you want to go to something at Wharton, you have to pay. There's not much you can go to that's free, that's a cultural event.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's something that people don't necessarily think of immediately, but when it's there, they're going to appreciate it.
Yeah, and so I think that's one of the reasons why the university has gotten so behind it, because, again, they see it as one of the the prime ways that they can interact with the public. We have a ton of ways that we interact with the students and with alumni and, and other ways to do things with the community, but not as much, where people can just come into a part of campus and see something.